It's right on the hour by my clock. So I'm just going to get started introducing this panel. People are going to trickle in, and that's just fine. We're offering a very unique panel at the Consilience Conference this year. This is going to be a panel that focuses on the arts, specifically the poetic arts, which anyone who's kind of tapped into the whole John Vervaeke kind of awakening from the meaning crisis kind of vibe is going to recognize the benefits of the poetic arts and the notion of autopoiesis, which seems to be one of the primary governing systems that seems to assist organisms in participating within the cosmos. So this is very relevant to transcendent naturalism, very relevant to the unified theory of knowledge, very relevant to, as they say, UTOK and Consilience, which of course goes back quite a bit before UTOK to Edmund Wilson and other people. We're going to be looking at creative expression in music, theater, and poetry. We're going to, in this panel, participate in a rather a dialectical fashion. One might even say that we might aspire from dialectic into dialogos. We're going to have a bit of a Socratic format. We're going to have a presentation of a piece, of an artistic piece. We're going to hear dialogue with that. We're going to hear another presentation, and then we're going to hear dialogue with that before we then can later participate as a whole within that larger conversation. I wanted to open up with just like I said, as people are pouring in, and I'm rambling and getting the panel started, I wanted to read just a brief 3-stanza poem by Emily Dickinson. It's National Poetry Month in the United States, and this is the type of time where, as Eliot once said, it's particularly ripe for the picking with respect to symbolic meaning. This is something Emily Dickinson, the Belle of Amherst, once wrote. She said, "Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity. It asked a crumb of me." With that, I'd like to introduce Owen Temple. Owen Temple is going to give us the first piece in today's panel. It's going to offer us the first step within this labyrinth toward which we're going to enter into the womb of. Owen, would you like to take it from here?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Good to be with you all. Emily Dickinson's words reverberating and resonating with me. Might invite everybody to take a breath and be together. And it's great to be together. We're gonna, as Aaron said, we're gonna present a work of art or a work and then dialogue about it. And so I'm talking to you from Austin, Texas today in the afternoon. Talking to you from my late 40s. It's by the calendar, and this is a practice of writing songs that I've done for the last maybe 25, 27 years. I've had the privilege to travel and do it, but today I'd like to do composition song. Here we go.
like to invite everyone who might have their microphone on to please mute.
When the noise is a bit too much, there's a way to stay in touch. Drop the layers of distraction, fall into main attraction. You're the message, you're the sender, you're the blessing and the receiver. The song of us is in the waves, always on both night and day. Breathing in, breathing slow. It's the I Am Radio. Galaxies, open arms, record spin on a disc of stars that's flashing with the frequency. Signals home to you and me. Earth the station, live broadcasting, chord progression, everlasting, groove so deep in rocks and bones, spirits singing from the stone. The song of us is in the waves, always on both night and day. Breathing in, breathing slow, it's the I Am Radio. The dance is long, the lights are low. It's the I Am Radio. Touch a tree, touch the earth, feel beyond death and birth. To rivers, oceans, clouds and rain, to tears of joy beneath the pain. Love and stillness radiates a warm glow, soft embrace that's everlasting, ever true, connecting all to me and you. The song of us is in the waves, always on both night and day. Breathing in, breathing slow, it's the I Am Radio. The dance is long, the lights are low. It's the I Am Radio.
From the Alpha to the Omega, that's the I Am Radio, played by Owen Temple. It's a blessing to have been able to hear that. I understand that Ethan is on the line. And Ethan, would you like to offer any response to or interpretation of that gem we just had the pleasure to behold?
Yeah. Wow, that's still sitting with me. Yeah. So I'm gonna try and like hold this here. Oh shit. Can you all hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, so I want to try and like hold that for a while I do a little bit of context setting. So for the next few minutes or so, I'll just engage with Owen in a particular way that we will sort of see for a while, and then afterwards, probably after Faisal's bit, we will kind of like pull the curtain back a little bit as to why it is engaged in the way that it is. Yeah, man, Owen, thank you for that. Do you
Very
mind
happy
just
to
like
do it. Great to be sharing with y'all.
bless? Good sir. It's something that really sticks out for me in that piece is like the way in which I heard you put dualities in relationship to each other, right? So even in the chorus, when we talk about it, which is how, so there was a really interesting turn which you did. And I'm not quite sure this was intentional. Do let me know. Which is like breathing in. The duality of breathing in, its opposition is breathing out, but you went breathing slow. What is it? What was there something behind that actually? It really caught me.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Good to perform and have this something to interact with. It's not, this isn't, we're not doing like American Idol or, this is, we're offering a work, and then I love the ability to talk about it. So as far, everybody's impression of it is yours, and that's valid. I would say breathing in, breathing slow. Songs for me are kind of a mythos that that I try to create to live in, and really as much as I can remember. And so sometimes motivates me to write a lyric is to just a mantra is just something that I wouldn't mind interacting with. Uh, and of course, I've written some dark songs too. That but then again, that's a different idea. In this particular one, I would say it's a bit of a mantra. Breathing in, breathing slow, connecting to that pure awareness, as we may, that. It was like one time I talked to my son. He's 20 years old, and he was about to move out of the house. He was about 18 years old. He was about to move out of the house, and said, "Hey, son, there's a basic well-being that's available to you, beyond all your, you know, wants and needs and projects and goals." And he said, "What?" I said, "Well, we need to talk about this more." Of course, he does, but that pure awareness, that there's the self, and then there's this connectedness to being, that is a really healthy place to come from. And so I think, but this particular piece, I wanted a reminder to live in that spot where we all do live, even though when we're caught up in the story of the justification of our particular projects, and trying to get people to, invest resources. But then that field of being that I am, is a real place of health and wealth that I just wrote that song for me. And then my friend said, "That's for me too." And then my other friend said, "That's for me too." So I justified recording it, so yeah. So breathing in, breathing slow. I would say, well, one, there's the pragmatics of rhyme. Is you can rhyme a slow. You sometimes you want to do these vowel sounds, and breathing out. You can still rhyme with shout. But maybe there was just a simple vowel but breathing slow. I think that's you feel more calm when you breathe slow. So yeah, thanks for reflecting.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like even when like every single time that you sang that, I felt myself kind of, I would say, like compelled to slow down. And the more that I did, the more I kind of like fell into the song with you. The guitar wasn't coming through as much.
Okay.
And that's more of a technical thing, but
yeah,
I would still latch on to the words in a particular way. And just for today, terribly, I must have slept wrong yesterday, but like I have a contraction around my chest, which tends to happen, which is like a sternum sort of like layering thing, which makes it in a way kind of like painful to breathe. And actually the gift, and I really call it a gift, like a particular, or in the technical term, an affordance that was given by that particular lyric, it sort of opened up for me. It was like, oh, I stopped feeling like captive to the pain in my chest. I was like, oh, okay. And I breathed into my belly actually when that occurred. And so something really fascinating happened when, I think probably around the first chorus. Right? No, it was after the first verse where you spoke about galaxies. And then what's that the lyric right after galaxies? What's that line?
Galaxies with open arms.
And then the next line?
Record spin on a disk of stars.
Yeah. Like that bit. My gosh, you draw such a wonderful like polarity between the cosmological and the everyday.
Yeah, thank you. That is a cool connection there. The metaphor being that, there's a music that is similar that you tune into, a song of us, that it's continually going on. In American history, we've got these ideas of these big broadcasts, these big, radio stations broadcasting across the US and selling snake oil or country music or, whatever in the 50s and 60s. And the idea that it's kind of coming from my context of country music and folk music to reference this kind of radio broadcast. But yeah, the idea that this broadcast is going out to galaxies, that's one thing I've found useful about UTOK is or having a philosophical, metaphysical mindset to sometimes inform art, is that you do feel a grounding in that connection between the cosmological and the earthly or the material. Well, it's all material, but personal, is afforded by a coherent, ontology or understanding of ontology. I do feel connected to the galaxies, and I feel like that song does resonate. And I don't mean that in an egotistical way. I mean, try to undo anything. It's not possible to undo anything. It's there, spreading, causing heat, causing interactions. And so, yeah. So that's one connection we could do to UTOK, I think, is that, the confidence that you can get from a map of knowing where you are. And that's one thing that's been afforded, it's not just the mind matter split, oh, is this mind or is this matter? It's more like, no, I'm on this stack of being. That's, culture. That song is a cultural spreading of a field of behavior, and but it's also operating on a level of a mind, not just words, because music is a little bit older than words. The rhythms and sounds and tones. When I'm angry, I'm not angry right now. You would be able to tell from my voice, if I was angry or not. So I think that you can also work on that field of either justification or culture, or down on the level of mind, and try to get the song to cohere in both ways with the lyric, and then also marrying to the, mind plane of. But yeah, that's a lot. But I appreciate your recognition of the trying to aspire to connect the cosmological to the person, because that was something.
Well, I love the point that you brought up just a couple of minutes ago, where there's that sort of like middle place between, or like the negotiation of that which is somewhere like higher and the grounded thing. And it was interesting, like just for me, I was thinking about the opening talk at 9, and the way in which there is this whole abstract layer, this like abstract level of things, which feels to me, as your song is speaking in a way to the metaphor of that being sort of like the galaxies and the cosmos. And then there is the personal level, which is what's happening for me, like just have a regular pain in my chest,
Yeah.
or the fact that it's 3 a.m. and I'm kind of tired, but like it helps to place me in this like, oh, right, yeah, there's that. And then there's also that. And just to sort of like exemplify that a little bit on the personal level, I found it in a way almost personally poetic. And I want to extend my appreciation for this, where you talk about a record, because a record is not a contemporary thing. It's like, even I grew up at like the generation of the first iPod Touch. You know what I mean? Like when they were trying to upsell the iPhone. So like I grew up at a time whereby I didn't have as much direct contact with something like a record player. But there was always one in my dad's room because my dad is a musician, a hobbyist musician. And it's a dusty old record player that actually almost never got used until like somewhat later in my life where he was working with it. But you know, it creates a certain personal connection for me that's not just familial, but it's chronal. Like it's across time. So it's not just for me an awareness of what's up there and what's happening in my life at the moment, but also what has happened and what is about to happen. And I really needed that. Oh, and I cannot tell you enough. Like I really needed to hear that song.
So I'm so glad, record is an interesting concept, and everything is recorded in matter and energy.
And if I could grab that right there, I was thinking
please.
about just to move things in the direction of the aspiration of the panel. One of the things I was catching was that some of the early recording technologies had to do with spinning on discs or spheres or cylinders. And it's something about one of the adjectives you were looking for. Oh, and it seemed like maybe you were looking for the adjective terrestrial, being planted on a body within a celestial sphere that has that orbital movement as we do in the cosmos. On the orb that we inhabit, which we call Earth, it kind of connected me what Ethan was saying to some of the ancient temple traditions, which would often conceptualize themselves as being at the center of the universe or the center of the cosmos. When you're here at Mass at this time, when you've participated in this sacrament, we're at the center of the cosmos. Even if that's just conceptual, it seems like it's a benefit to the type of minded beings that we seem to be. And now we're going to have another artistic piece put forward by Faisal. I'm not certain of the nature of the piece, but the floor is open to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, so it's a poem, but it's more of a rhythmic poem. I'm very influenced by rap and hip hop growing up, and it has really influenced the means by which I express. So that's a little context for it. And yeah, like I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna perform it, and then Ethan and I will enter into a dialogue with that as well. I might give some more context about the writing process after, but I'm just gonna go ahead and do this. Okay. I'm human, all too human, a walking contradiction. As I shadowbox with the paradox of life in the light, reaching for insight, I realize that I'm addicted to my own afflictions, caged by my own convictions, more defined by my lack of literacy and the limitations of my diction. Every act and affect predicated by predilections. It's not facts that I'm attached to, more like the fictions that my mind creates and sanctions that shape my so-called reality, a fallacy put in place to appease these anxious states of being. When I face anomalies, far too often I flee, unconsciously reacting to my past, untapped pain, shame, and grief that I constantly try to bury in vain, running in place or praying on our knees. Nascent we remain, chained in this cave, longing for liberation. What would it take to awaken from this matrix and finally be free?
Ethan, I think now's a good time for you to comment.
I'm tickled. I am.
Don't make me go get my drums. That's so good.
Amen.
Peso, brother. Like, so to go from Owen's piece to that is a huge shift for me, like experientially. And I just want to share a little bit of impact. It's like as you were speaking, I sort of got like sounds really unromantic and unpoetic, but it's like a square of cheese in front of my face. And you know, each line was kind of like cutting holes in the cheese. And so I'm left with like, in a weird sort of way, it's like, okay, so I was cutting holes in the cheese and I was stepping back a little bit. And then as I did that, I felt myself equally kind of like compelled into, well, what's beyond the cheese? Like what's through the hole that's cut? What's like, I'm gazing into it. And I feel like pulled, you know what I mean? And like, I suppose the desire is kind of, what's the word? Like, there's a, I don't know, do you know what this gesture is? It's like a yanking or like a yoking, you know, forward into it. I'm left with that kind of momentum. And so like my question to you would be like when you were sort of, actually, no, I want to leave it a bit more open-ended. Like, what's that like to hear?
Yeah. When you said that, what came to mind was a heeding of a call, a heeding of the call of that which is transcendent, and that being like, for me, it's a sense of like being pulled by something, drawn forth, educed, right?
Yeah.
And that's the sense that I have during writing in general, and specifically this piece. And it's like this is like, I'm trying to like, I'm exploring, just exploring. And then as I'm exploring, more of me is revealed. And then as more of me is revealed, there's something that is revealing that more of me. And it's like, what is that thing that's revealing more of me? And that sense of being pulled towards this thing that is not a thing. And it's like, what is this that we're pointing to? It's no thing. And for me, maybe the logos, that which withdraws and discloses, right? So that's the sense that when you did this, I was like, and like, it's like, yeah, that's how I feel. Like I'm being pulled by something. There's something drawing more of me out. And I want to heed this call and attune to this drawing forth more and more.
Yeah, I have that, like, is that same thing for me, like, and I'm glad that you brought up revelation, like the kind of like the revealing aspect of it. And I'm just struck by that question, like having written it, read it, heard it reflected back to you, or at least the impact of it reflected back to you. I'm wondering if there was anything that was revealed in the process of that.
Yeah. What was is that one thing that was revealed was that the power of participation in the process of engaging with the difference between like me writing the piece on my own in my room, and in my mind, it's like I'm participating in this process of being drawn out and being pulled forth. But there's a difference when it's brought into a relational sphere, when it's brought into a dialogical realm. There's something that is, the stakes are higher. And by virtue of the stakes being higher, there's a way in which that which is revealed to me is something that can only be revealed in and afforded by this realm. And what it is that how this can connect to another person. That's like, to make it a little more abstract, like the impact of you hearing what you said kind of like, it's like, wow, that's almost similar. It's similar to my experience writing it. So the connection, the relationality is revealed to a greater degree. Something like that.
Yeah, it's great because like as you say that, I realize that like the pulling feeling or like the thing that's past the cheese, I'm somewhat satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something about what you've articulated that like, yeah, that's what's beyond. You know, I'll never look at cheese the same way again, by the way, after this point.
Yeah, me neither. Cheese and art. And it's funny, when you said cheese, I was like, after every line I wrote, it felt like I was clearing up, or at least more of the what it is that's pulling me is being revealed.
Right.
It's like I'm a walking contradiction, and these are the ways I'm a walking contradiction. And as I'm realizing all the ways that I'm a walking contradiction. The more I'm realizing that it's like, oh, there's something beyond it. The fact that I'm writing this and calling this into question, the act of questioning itself feels like almost being possessed by that which is maybe connected to the transcendence. Just the act of questioning, that wonderment that is induced or educed by virtue of attuning to this, attuning and heeding the call of this.
So because the thing that struck me right when you began is like that you start with that line, eh? Right? Like, I'm human, I'm a walking contradiction. Yeah, I see Greg's hand has come up. I just want to like drop this question in and then see whether it might spark something, and then I'll pass on to Greg. But it's like, are there ways in which now, like right now at this moment, that the contradictory nature of your existence has come to the fore?
Yeah, because it's like the one many distinction is in my head right now. It's like, like individual. Am I an individual that goes in his room and writes for hours and this and whatever? It's like, no, even that is dialogical, right? And it's like, no, but at the same time, like we need some sort of. I think Barth said this in the emergentism and naturalism. There's a way in which, like, I think he's talking about Hegel. It's like it's all relationality, but for the sake of like grounding ourselves in one particular moment in time, or like for the sake of understanding or some sort of directionality, there needs to be some structure and form. So it's not necessarily a monad, but there's a temporary order put in place for the sake of acting, almost like a ground to stand on. So it's like that's what's coming up for me. It's like just right here as we're dialoguing about this, there's a way in which like the order is like breaking and then being revitalized, breaking and being revitalized after every question that you pose. And the more you engage with it, it's like, and then it's like, oh, yeah, it's kind of the sense that I'm getting.
As moderator, I'm compelled to step in at that juncture because that's that's perfectly in sync conceptually with what we're experiencing with respect to the order and form of our panel. We're still in the section where the two of you can continue to talk about this piece, but we saw that we had a raised hand from the audience. Right. Now we're going to have some Q&A at the end, but would you like to have Greg jump in at this juncture for a moment?
Yeah, by all means.
Oh, sorry if I'm disrupting. I just need to pop in. Worries. I mean, first off, I'm so glad I got to hear that here, Faisal. So thank you. Second, I knew I could come to the art for creative expression. I never thought the Freudian filter could be represented with a block of cheese. But here I am, completely reframing the Freudian filter as an experienced block of cheese that we can both be cheesy and see through to see our true selves on a reflective way. And then recognize our Rogerian filters as we collectively connect to it and share it publicly, all realizing our little events across a rainbow of process. I'm fucking loving it. So I just had to share that. And say that warmed my heart at multiple levels. And folks, if we ever get this goddamn shit out for people, this is the kind of thing. And Owen and you, Ethan, I mean, this art this is what people can actually connect with, right? This is what they can sink their teeth into, to play the metaphor one more time. And that was just beautifully articulated. So that's what I want to share, and that I was touched, and I'm gonna, of all the imagery perhaps of today, that may be the one I carry through the longest. So totally lovely. So
even Piaget might have a place in the unified theory of knowledge, perhaps. Is there anything more the two of you would like to talk about before we bring Owen back in?
From previous conversations and my experience with Faisal, we can go on for a long time. So there is every time is an opportune time.
Well, I'll tell you, Owen, I was thinking about you in particular when we were talking about this idea of perceiving oneself as walking a route of contradiction through the act of writing. I heard the term logos invoked, and I was wondering maybe if you could comment on this nature of metacognition as it pertains to the creative and the writerly act. Once you write a lyric down, you have the opportunity to conceptualize it, cognize it, and to react to it internally before you ever present it to other people to enter into dialectic. I wonder if that might be a launch pad for the four of us to participate in a little conversation, if that idea has any resonance with you.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. And thank you, Greg, too. That observation about the filters is something that Faisal and Ethan and I had in some previous conversations. So the metacognitive observer is kind of the once something is written, can kind of, there's a Rogerian filter we're passing that up to persona, but maybe is there an artistic filter? Maybe the Rogerian puts on a beret and becomes the Picasso filter, because sometimes the public persona that you're thinking about is the other art that you love, and whether the other artists that you love will like this. Should I pass it through the filter? The Rogerian filter might also be kind of does that artistically stick? Does it resonate? So, before we pass it up to that public persona, there might be the artist has kind of been informed by the previous art that they loved, and to develop their filter and the permeability of that filter to what, when ideally when you're creating, when you're trying to write, you try to enter a flow state in which you try to keep your filters as open as possible, so you can get down to that experiential impressions and connect your hand to the page without trying to stop too much. Now, later on, that's a great point, Aaron, for the craft of writing, is that later on you want to go, that's interesting, but is that in the work or not, or not? Or, should I rewrite this? This seems a little, inauthentic or a little bit cliche, So yeah, I think that the metacognitive observer is kind of the one that's running, can be the stream in which you evaluate those self streams. Greg, does it seem like have you thought about whether the metacognitive is part of what's switching, or Ethan or Faisal, does it seem like a metacognitive observer that's kind of running that? Interesting.
Yeah, I'll just say really quick. So the unbelievable thing John talked about, and I talk about this in Untangling Your World Not, of the framing structure, is that you can bounce it around across a wide variety of different areas. And ultimately, with the metacognitive observer, we are trying to consolidate that reflective element. Okay, and we do this. The persona is doing this as you grow as an adolescent, but then as you get into an adult, you realize you're jumping around for a wide variety. You're wearing all sorts of different hats. And then you're cultivating your identity hat as an artist, is what you're essentially saying. And you're saying, okay, what does this mean across time in my identity? And when we are consolidating the metacognitive observer, we're basically saying, there is a way to step above and outside your persona, your ego, and do so deliberately and hold this frame of reference. Now, normally what's happening, if you're not reflective about it, is this frame is just jumping around. I argue you're constantly being pulled back into a persona, into an ego, and into an experiential self. But we can then be where, well, actually, what are the strands at sort of a full metacognitively reflective adult stage? What's the sort of pinnacle of this from a sage? What are the core elements, me as a psychologist, you as an artist, et cetera, that we would hold across particular audiences and reflect what we're doing in relationship to that? So that certainly resonates. It's just less efficient. It's part of the structure. It's just less officially sort of an equilibrium point. But the whole metacognitive observer of COM-MO says actually we can develop that particular perspective.
I want to jump in here a little bit as well, as I see an opportunity for me to kind of like catch folks up on the discussions that Faisal and Owen and I have had up to this point. And so in order to do that, I kind of have to turn, it's not really changing hats. I'm wearing almost like a three-sided hat with like a philosopher and then a scientist and also an artist. And I have to kind of like switch from the philosopher side like about like 90 degrees, you know, to the more sort of like scientific aspect. And so we began this kind of conversation around like, well, what is the nature and function of art? And this was kind of inspired by the way that John tackles the hard problem of consciousness, right? What is the nature and function of consciousness? And so the proposal came out as something like art is the emergent representation of a perspective on one's relationship to the world. And that its function is to actually reframe the perspective of one's relationship to one's environment by virtue of a shared object, which is that representation in and of itself. And so it's almost like whether it's a poem or it's a song or it's a album or it's a theater performance, there is something upon which metacognition can, well, the person in entirety can revolve around the object and then engage in different perspectives of how one relates to that and one relates to one's environment. Now, when it comes to the creative process, right, which is kind of where I hear Aaron's initial question pointing at, is that there is a way in which the metacognitive observer, and this is also part of the ecology of praxis that I teach, is required to be enacted in such a way that it affords certain constraints. And so I'll give you an example. Art has an uncanniness to it, right? So if I were to draw something that was hyper realistic, right? So someone takes a screenshot of me and I draw like a hyper realistic rendition of me, the normative frame from which we judge that piece of work is how accurate is it to the actual thing. Now, that insofar as the nature and function that I've proposed thus far is somewhat not quite fitting, or you have to engage with it in a different way because the normativity is so close to what is here and like what is that thing. But if someone did like an abstract, like say maybe a watercolor painting of myself, there's a certain degree of uncanniness where it's like it's close enough to the thing that I can tell it's a portrait of Ethan, but it's far enough away that it opens up a certain dimension of like, wow, what's that actually revealing about this? Oh, you know, the blue really captures like the color of his, I don't know, persona or the way in which he engages with people, or fluidity or something like that. So the uncanniness allows us to try to make sense of something as we engage with it. And in doing that, like provokes that extra bit of novelty, which might afford a different way in which we're relating to the world or relating to something that might look like that. So that's kind of the proposal that Faisal O and I kind of like discussed and put forward a little bit. And I was wondering whether you two gentlemen have anything to add to that? Did I miss anything out from our last conversations?
So I wanted to jump in and say a few different things. So a bunch of things came up for me and trying to bring them all together and connect what everybody has said so far. So one thing is what you said, Greg, about there's a way in which we are drawn in by our personas. Like, well, an immature psyche is randomly drawn in and kind of dragged from one aspect or one identity to another based off what is salient and what is presenting itself to a moment. So there's a way in which we are gripped by affect, and when we are gripped by affect, we inhabit a perspective without us being aware that we've inhabited a perspective. So we fall inside of the frame without ever realizing that it is a frame. So there's a way in which, like, and I want to connect this to projections, right? Like, and so there's a way in which we are gripped and we see our projections as not a projection, as reality. And that's what makes it a projection, when we unconsciously transfer subjective contents that exist in our psyche, but not only within our psyche, but that are in our psyche onto an external object. So in that process, we don't realize that we are gripped by something before us, and that can be disguised as judgments. That can be disguised as behind the judgment, there's expectations. There's things that stories and narratives, there are justifications that are drawn out after the fact that we are gripped by this sort of affect. Does that make sense, right? But then there's a way in which there's a perspectival shifting that's afforded by the metacognitive observer. There's a way in which we can reflect. We can realize, how do we realize that, oh, this is actually a frame that I'm placing on the world. I bring my projection from an unconscious place to consciousness by finding the bounds of the way in which I'm framing the world, right? So this is reflecting upon our projection. So when we reflect upon a projection, we see its edges. We clarify its edges. This is the way that we're constraining the world. And is it accurate? Maybe not, right? But there's a way in which there needs to be a dialectic between, Greg, you have an article about the emotional sweet spot, right? Between attunement and regulation in terms of emotion, right? So there's a way in which we need to hold a dialectic between stepping into a frame and actually being embodied, inhabiting the frame, and then reflecting on what it is that this frame is assuming in the world, right? So that's one thing that I wanted to point to. And it's like that process, that dialectic between the two. I think that process is actually analogous to the artistic process in the way in which we realize ourselves to a greater degree by the inhabitation and stepping back of different identities, and then reformulating and actually either generating new identities or by inhabiting a current identity and kind of just revitalizing, kind of saying, okay, these are the ways in this identity which I inhabited is actually leading me astray, is subjecting me to self-deception. That's one thing that came up. I'll leave it there. I'm curious as to what's going on with anybody else there, but
I feel that, and I mean that does represent our conversation well. One other thing I think about when I think about this frame is I think about sometimes that frame gets bigger. You know, so one of the perspectives that we get is sometimes a bigger sense of bigness. You know, by being able to see more than one perspective, we see the whole. You know, we started with maybe just our narrow perspective.
Yeah.
The artistic, you know, the process of viewing art or making art gives you two perspectives, making your frame somehow a little bit bigger. So I would say the word awe, A-W-E, is something that I think I've noticed a lot in a lot of the best art that I've encountered, is that, wow, I could only see a piece of it before, but now I can. It's like walking along the Catskills and you can see the valley and you can see 3 towns now. That little town that you were at the cafe, but now you can see that Poughkeepsie from over in the Catskills. And so I think the feeling of awe is another time that art, I think, succeeds for me. I'm not going to say that's the only time, but is that when it snaps me to a bigger frame, which is part of, I got to say that, you know, having a coherent philosophical or metaphysical picture gives me a sense of awe to work from as an artist. And, is this sales for UTOK? Yeah, I guess it is, because if you can approach, if you know where you're on the map, you can proceed with confidence a little bit. You can proceed with confidence about narrating what you see. I'm narrating from this being on this plane, connected to all my ancestors, human, primate, animal, down to matter through time. That's a great viewpoint, to be able to be looking out on. So yes, for sure, that resonates with me. And then sometimes I see even bigger, and that's a special moment for me. And I try to catch that.
I want to just double click on that, Owen. That was really actually quite great. And let me see whether this is. I'm going to throw out a proposal, and then let's see whether or not you and Faisal can sort of like between you also see if it resonates with you in terms of process. Like what I'm hearing when you do this and like saying, okay, well, I want to find that moment of awe is like, would you then say that what the metacognitive observer does in the creation of a piece of art is to say, where's the edge? Where's the edge here of this cheese? So I just can't help but like when I do this, I see cheese. No, but it's like, is it the finding of that unknown bit that I'm trying to tie into the earlier example I gave with that, like with the uncanniness, like where's the point where it just crosses that like 3-degree mark there, and is that an accurate description, I suppose, of what it is to create something? And I say this partially because I recognize that for myself, but I also don't know if it's just an idiosyncratic thing or if it's something that other creators in different mediums as well also find.
Yeah, there's so much I want to pick up on here, but just answering to what you just said about, it's the process of complexification. It's this dialectic between chaos and order. And it's the pushing the boundaries of whatever established order that we have, this frame that we're looking at, this portrait of this person, right? It's like if we just looked at another portrait that looked exactly the same, we wouldn't call that art, right? There has to be, like you said, uncanniness or novelty, maybe another word that we can use there. There has to be some sort of novelty to where the boundaries are expanded, right? And it's like, I think one iteration or one archetypal example is the hero story. That which revitalizes a pathological culture is the hero that ventures out into the unknown and it brings back something intelligible for the sake of complexification and evolution of an existing culture. So I think right? It's the expansion of the boundaries, right? That they're connected to the process of complexification and self-criticality. Self-organizing criticality. It's like there's a way in which order, and this is very Petersonian, order always tends towards reification and tends towards our rigidity and pathologization, and then eventually tyranny, right? But the role of the artist, I think, in at least an aspect of the role of the artist, is almost the identification with the process of revitalization of reified order for the sake of evolving a society and pushing boundaries. Something like that, as in like.
Can you say that one more time, but slower?
Oh, I don't know.
It is
okay.
It's almost 4 a.m. for me. I want to make sure I catch that because it's juicy as all hell.
Yeah. Okay. So it's the role of an artist, I think, in society, to at least an aspect of it, but I think this is kind of pointed to the multi-aspectuality of it to a degree. It's like the role of an artist is the identification with the process of participation in the revitalization of pathologized order or stagnant order for the sake of evolving that order for the sake of greater complexification. That was a mouthful, but like something like that. Like there's a way in which I think earlier, Bard said we need missionaries for anti-dogmatism. that's the role of an artist, I think. Their existence, I think, and I think this is kind of draws a distinction between propaganda and art, right? Because when propaganda is subservient to an ideology, when art is subservient to an ideology, it becomes propaganda because it does not connect it to the transcendent. It's connected to an idol, a false idol of that which is transcendent. But the proper way of engaging with art, I think art is a symbol of the process of transcendence. And by nature of it being a real symbol, it affords the process of transcendence by entering in a relationship to it. There's a bunch of different things there, but like, yeah.
Owen, do you have something? If not, I want to answer the propaganda thing.
No, I just glad we used the word transcendence. Yeah, that does feel right to me. It's about some of what we talked about.
Yeah, 100%. And, as somebody who has worked in the arts and cultural sector for, about 20 years at this point, yeah, I'm concerned deeply with the way in which we distinguish art from propaganda, because I love the thing that you had articulated around art being like an allegiance to the process of participation. And I see that, I call it, and I raise you that propaganda actually dissuades people from the process of participation, because it says,
Exactly.
here's this message that you need to see. And we saw this, you brought the Petersonian frame, I fall into it. Like, it's like, so during the Cultural Revolution, there's a lot, and the Soviet Revolution as well, there's a lot of propaganda posters. And it's become a style of its own, it's an aesthetic of its own.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was still studying art in my university days, right, we were looking at propaganda art, propaganda pieces of visual collateral, because I wouldn't call it art, right? And art. And so there was a way in which propaganda goes, you don't have to question it. You don't have to participate. You just do the thing that the bloody poster tells you to do, and you'll be fine. Otherwise, we'll kill you, probably, right? And so I'm also concerned, because we've talked about this as like the problem. We had a conversation around sort of like, what is the problem of art? Analogous to call it the problem of psychology. And there was something that had come up around the idea that I think the postmodern movement in art has given us a lot. It's diversified a lot of ways in which we can make things. It's diversified processes to a very, very large degree. And I don't want to knock that at all. I would consider a lot of my aesthetic to be somewhat postmodern. However, it has, across a lot of very complex factors, turned art from, hey, how do we engage with this thing in a reflective, recursive manner that allows us to take on different perspectives or experiment with different ways of being and seeing the world, and into a guessing game of the artist's intention. What did you mean by that? Why did you do that? Or I just go to the museum or the gallery and I read the little blurb. I never do that. I never go to galleries and read the little blurb, because it curtails in a lot of ways the processes by which I would engage with a particular piece. And I'm seeing this as a large problem, because what tends to happen is it subsumes the agency of the viewer to the implicit authority of the artist as the maker. And as far as that degree of engagement is concerned, I fear that we've internalized, as a sort of art viewing audience, internalized the propaganda machinery, or the propaganda kind of way, we're dissuaded from that participation, rather than having the orientation or the skills to engage with it in a recursive, reflective manner. And I don't think it's anyone's fault. I want to make sure that I state that very publicly, right? But I would say that there is almost a duty to learn or relearn how we engage with a piece in a relational way, in a participatory fashion, such that it allows us to engage with the world by, exactly as you said, revitalizing and poking holes in the Swiss cheese of the perceived order. Yeah. So I just want to bring that into, yeah.
at the risk of being a commentator instead of a moderator, one of the things I'm thinking about is, early 20th century and the rise of fascism. It seems like people started to think that they could participate in a sort of artistic object that was outside of the media, and that sort of sacrificed themselves as metacognitive agents in subservience to some sort of cultural movement, which gave undue power to authoritarian leaders and bureaucracies, and we see the same thing, ironically, in some contemporary democracies as well. So now we're entering into the Q&A section. We don't want everything to go haywire. So if anyone would consider potentially using the raise hand option within the chat feature, that would be particularly beneficial, because then we could sort of allow people to participate in the conversation in a more orderly fashion, rather than people just sort of jumping in non sequitur. But in the meanwhile, I wonder if my take on what we were just talking about, which reminded me of something that Ethan was saying earlier about the emergent representation, reframing one's orientation via a shared object, being some sort of connection between the aspiration of the artist as a metacognitive person with the audience as a potential metacognitive person. And Andrew, I see you've got your hand up. You want to give a question?
Yeah, I mean, you can go ahead and finish yours, and then I can go.
I'm just blathering, buddy.
Good to see you, by the way. Yeah, I figure this is more of a kind of a small group thing, and so I would not call myself an artist. I play music, but I'm not at the, sort of the creative level you guys are. But one thing, Owen, I wanted to ask you, like the I am radio. I love that. Like, could we even say to a degree, how Greg has the flashlight for call memo?
Yeah.
Could we almost do a metaphor for a dial? Like the I am radio is always playing. And like all I have to do is tune in, similar to turning the flashlight on. Like all I have to do is tune in, just like my inner critic, it's always there. And if I want to tune in, I can just go off on myself. Right.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Like in the stack, like maybe there's also a play there on tuning into the frequency and knowing that it's living there. I mean, it's not even really a question. It's just like it inspired me to think about that.
No, that's a good, I think that resonates with me too. I mean, there is some skill involved and there's some work involved to adjust that, to tune that. We've all, I mean, a lot of us have tried to tune a old school radio, and sometimes there's a station right in between the two biggest ones that you want to listen to. At least I remember that as a kid.
Yeah. Me too.
And I feel that too, that there's some skill in finding it. Like you said, there's the talk radio, some of it less helpful. And sometimes we can tune past that and hear the music of the spheres. And so, I feel that, Andrew. I like that a lot. And
I may even play with that, like sort of get an old dial. I think I have a couple still, like the long form frequencies, and like sort of play with some of the frequencies and what could they be. Like one thing I've noticed in myself is sometimes I want to be on a negative frequency. Like Greg talks about triple neurotic loops, and it's okay. Like I even tell myself that, it's okay, Andrew, you want to be negative right now, tune into that channel, but just know you're choosing to tune into that channel. That channel doesn't tune you. And that is very helpful.
I love that, because I also love that this metaphor can help us, navigate our real, the terrestrial life, our emotional life. A great metaphor, can help us steer, and so I love that. I've sometimes gotten, whenever I do like a metaphor, sometimes I'll look for an old radio and put it on my desk and try to remind myself of that. So that's a mythos move.
That's right. That's right.
It's where the storytelling that we're, putting in our environment is, orients us, to what ought to be, or what we, the garden, as Greg might say, help us navigate the garden. And I love that, Andrew. No.
Oh, that's cool.
Bezo, you have any comments on that?
about specifically the radio. So not necessarily specifically the radio piece, but what a few things that were said after, and also connected to the galaxy in your arms or with open arms, and kind of like what came up to me right now is like fractals. It's like a way in which I was thinking about this earlier. It's like the revitalization of self in the artistic process. Like for me, when I'm creating art, there's a revelation of self and the process of more of myself being revealed to me and realization of self too. There's a way in which it's revitalized. So I was thinking about that on a macro scale. It's like, okay, as a, or not maybe meso, like society. A society kind of like, it's an amalgamation of different selves in relationship to one another. So a way in which if when the process of a single individual, which is really a dividual, which is pretty much an internal society, a self is another society inside of, in a way, right? So there's a way in which like the fractal of myself being embodied and embodying the process of transcendence. And when there are multiple people in a society that embody that process of transcendence and place evolvability of evolution of like the capacity to evolve at the top of one's like hierarchy, that's when a society I think flourishes, when we're pushing the boundaries rather. So that's what came up for me. It's not like directly related, but there, that's the fractal piece of like self in relation to what's outside larger amalgamation. We think about periodic table of behavior. That's what I think, that's what connected the things here in terms of like self, collection of cells, to societies, to universe, and the way in which how I know myself, conformity theory, how I know myself reflects how I know the world in a way. So that's what came up for me.
Coming up for you, Ethan.
There's a lot here. And I think that for me, when I think about, okay, what is the thread of relationality that's running from...
Can you turn up just a little bit?
Yeah. Oh,
sorry to interrupt.
No,
yeah, it was just hard to hear.
Yeah. So what was I looking for? It is 4 a.m. So I think about the thread of relationality from the most macro scale to the most micro scale. That there is almost like a kind of is it trust? Is it faith? Is something along those lines. There's like a leaning into the relationality that a piece of art is going to impact me here somewhere, and in the deepest minutia, it can show me something, and that's okay. And that if it makes me think about something large and cosmic and like universal and like, wow, very macro, there's also something there as well. Like they're inherently valuable. And it's how we say, okay, actually, oh, there's commonality here, which is kind of what I was pointing at with Owen's song, that like the earlier point that I made around like drawing a connecting point between the macro and the micro. And it's like, where is that? So there's almost like an extension of good faith to the act of engaging with a piece of art. And so I think this is something that Faisal and I had talked about, is like the artist is an identity, but the artistic orientation is independent of that. And I say this because Andrew, you had said, so, oh, I'm not a musician, I'm not at, and I will go, I will push back on that, and say that actually I think the artistic orientation is intrinsic to the way in which we engage with the world. We don't always know how we do that. And to a certain degree, I think we're trying to find out, or at least give words to that. And by doing that, hopefully afford some kind of practical dimension. But we can become cognizant of this artistic orientation such that we can engage more readily with fellow artists or people who identify as artists, as well as their pieces, as well as the world. And I think that's properly inclusive, I would say. I'm not sure if I went on too much of a tangent there, but like that was kind of where I just followed it.
I don't think it was a tangent at all. Are there any questions from the group? I have a question of my own, but if somebody else would like to enter one into the chat, just raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and ask mine. There's an old modernist idea that T.S. Eliot had that kind of plays into the sense of a common faith for this thread of relationality. He used to call it the objective correlative. There used to be this idea that would be something like, who's the guy, the theorist who wrote about semantics? I can't remember, maybe it's Saussure or somebody like that, said something about, there being a referent and then a signifier and then a signified. There are these levels of whatever, but this idea that there's this objective correlative, there's something up here that the artist can kind of see and can kind of put some kind of good faith stock in the idea that themselves as an artistic identity is aspiring toward that, and also assume that whoever's participant in the audience, auditor, listener, reader, viewer, name the term, might also be willing to aspire towards that same aspiration of an objective correlative. Is that something that is a useful concept? Is that relevant here? Or am I just throwing shit at the wall?
I like that. Yeah, it's good. It's good shit. Yeah. And I think it connects very much with what we were saying. I think there was a little bit of Ethan about the idea of, we've come around the idea of, how to be a good viewer of art. And yeah, so, calm MO comes up for me, the curiosity you required, it's the acceptance. So I would say, Aaron, with the acceptance that a viewer gives to, oh yes, I'm willing to go with you there. That was something that came up in our conversations, Ethan and Faisal and I, when we were about what makes a good good in a way of can benefit the most from interacting with art. And curiosity was real important. Acceptance of the frame, the willingness to go along with the frame, which I think is what you were bringing up for me there, Aaron. Then a loving kindness, and then motivated towards valued states of being. I think that, and then the MO, I think that all that is a way to not only have good psychological health for oneself, but I think it's a way that you can learn the most and integrate the most of other perspectives, is if you do have that same calm MO. That might be there might be your list of virtues or practices about the next time you go to a museum or go, first try to, instead of one thing Ethan and Faisal and I talked about is whether someone likes something or not, sometimes is not the ideal place to be. You can't learn the most from that. You can learn the most from curiosity. Ethan, I like the way you said this the other day was, what kind of person would I have to be to make that? Am I willing to accept that point of view at least long enough to learn from it? So no, I'm with you that there's an assumption, Aaron, that the audience would be willing to, make that jump also.
There's so much here. Yeah. One thing I wanted to touch on that you said, Aaron, about the artist puts in a good faith stock into this something that's unclear, there's an investment, right? And I remember, Ethan, you had on your UTOK with Greg, you guys were talking about art is actually not an obvious good behavioral investment. If you really think about it, literally, it's there is no obvious return. For me, for years, I questioned, why am I still writing? I've been writing for 12 years. I haven't made a cent off of it. It's not productive in the obvious sense that we think of productivity. So there's a way in which that good faith stock is, it needs faith. It needs faith in the true sense, right? So I think that's what I wanted to touch up on, just connect that to UTOK a little more directly, because I think that's important. And then, the calm MO is another thing. It's there's a way in which when we cultivate the capacity for a calm MO, inside of us, we're able to shine that upon, I think, other people, but also in our how we interact with, like, let's say I watch a movie and like pick up on what Owen just said. It's like there's a way in which I like it or I don't like it. So I project something, I'm unconsciously projecting something that's inducing some sort of affect in me, right? A lot of people, I think, stop. It's like, oh, I don't like it or I do like it. And they go through, experience the affect and move on. And I think what we were talking about, it's like actually the artistic way of being is the questioning of why don't I like this? It's reflecting, is taking that projection as a point of self-reflection to learning more about the reason why you don't like it, which actually affords transformation. So that is participating in the process of transformation by means of this, the way we are projecting onto this art piece, right? So that's the orientation, I think, of the artistic way of being. It's like, okay, how, even though I don't like it, or even if I do like it, how can I use this as a point of transcending my current self and revealing more of that self and realizing more of that self? So yeah, like I'll leave it there for now.
There's a lot here should be put on a shirt, I think. Let's sell that. This reminds me of a lot, actually. And so I'll tell a short story and hopefully give a practical tool. So I went on a date in Toronto in December and went to the what was it called, the National Museum, the Royal Museum of Ottawa or something like that. So
ROM, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Like ROM.
And there was a exhibition of Arnold Newman's photographs. So he's a huge inspiration to me in the world of photography. And so I do this thing every time I go on a date with somebody to a museum. I'd say, okay, hello, nice to meet you. Get away from me for half an hour. And they're going to go off for half an hour and find two pieces that really land with them, or like they resonate with, or it impacts them in a certain way. I'll go find two pieces and then we'll come back after half an hour and we'll take each other to each other pieces and we'll share. And I found the first piece rather quickly. I found the second piece after much deliberation. But once I found it was right. And it was a portrait that Arnold Newman had taken of Robert J. Oppenheimer. And it was by far the most terrifying, I think, portrait that I'd ever seen. And it's him at this desk. This is 1948, and they accompany it with the newspaper article in which that picture was printed. There's a big white table, and he's got his papers in front of him. There's a black wall. Well, it's a white wall behind him, but there's a black area on the left. But it's his gaze, the way he stares into the camera. I brought my date over and I shared this with her, and I said, like, just look, like, so I held her in front of me. I'm like, stand over here for a while, okay, and then just slowly walk towards the picture, right? And I brought to her, like, look at that gaze. This is a gaze of a man who demands that you bear responsibility and hold him responsible for the atrocities that he has committed indirectly. So I'm attributing meaning to it, right? Now, Arnold Newman doesn't care how I interpret the photograph. Oppenheimer doesn't either, right? But it's in that process of engagement. It's like, because what I'm doing is like, wait, this is what it calls me towards. If I was in this photo, if I was Oppenheimer, under the weight of that responsibility, I would stare into the camera in the exact same way. If I was Arnold Newman and I was taking that picture, he took multiple frames, right, as he always does. That's the one I pick too. And there's a way in which I can share that with somebody. And so, in this sense of like indwelling the object that is presented as a piece of art, right? To sit in it and to say, well, what kind of person do I have to be to make this piece, to be able to talk about the Meishi's, you know, as Faisal has done, right? To write the song that Owen has written. Right? It's like, what would it be like to like think about the American dream or the country road? I'm sure that's definitely not Owen's intention. You know, I don't get the sense that you want me to think it that way. But the fact that I do allows me to consider, well, what would it be if that were the case? And I think that any engagement with art is properly dialogical. So maybe, you know, in a sense, like instead of, if we have the Kamemo flashlight, art is an opportunity to move it from here, to move it from here to whatever piece of art that's there. And even if we say, I don't get it, what is it you don't get? What is it that's mysterious? What is it about it that is baffling, that throws you into confusion, that locks you up, that makes you freeze in its presence? You know, and if that were the case, it's like, okay, cool. What else is there? It's a gateway to exploration, I feel.
Yeah. I want to say one thing, just one thing, or two things short. I'll try to keep them short. I struggle with that. So one, you said indwelling, right? Indwelling, there's also the internalization post indwell, or like at the same time, because like we indwell by projecting something inside of us onto this, and we kind of like live in there. What would it be like to be there and in relationship to it, right? And then there's an internalization of what would it be like to be the person that drew this, right? There's both the indwelling and internalization that happens, right? And it's like you said, this is all kind of analogous to relationships too, right? It is a relationship. So when we engage with art, our capacity to engage, I think this is a little bit of a bold claim, but our capacity to engage with art is reflective of our capacity to enter in relationship with art is reflective of our capacity to enter a relationship of any kind, like real relationship. Yes. And I think that's also reflective of our relationship to ourselves. And if we talk like in terms of IFS, of different parts of ourselves, and that comes to the COMMO, right back to the COMMO. Am I relating to those parts of myself with that critic voice? Am I relating with that COMMO voice? Am I looking at this art piece from a critical sense? Oh, there's this, there's a little mark here I don't like. There's this about this topic I don't like, or my notes. Like, how can I relate to this better? How can I open myself up enough to be transformed and impressed by this art piece? Impressed in every sense of the word, right? Not just impressed as like, oh, wow. No, impressed upon of my very being and transformed by nature of being impressed on in relationship to this piece. I think that's reflective of how we relate to anything. So, yeah.
Well, with that impulsion from, toward, and into what sounds to me to be something like the transjective, I think we've accomplished quite a bit in today's segment. I'd like to thank everybody for being here for our panel at the Consilience Conference, and welcome everyone to continue on to other panels. I'd like to thank our artists and speakers, and I guess we'll leave the room open if people want to continue to mingle, have coffee and chat. People might be trying to get to other segments from here, or maybe they'll need to take a break. Thanks for being here. I need to have a heart out in about 5 minutes. But like I said, if anybody wants to continue to mingle, they're more than welcome. Thanks to everybody. This has been really fascinating and quite enriching.
Thanks, Aaron. We do have until 45 minutes, so I would love to stick around and continue this and just hang out with everyone here. But thank you, Aaron.
Yeah. Talk to y'all soon.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.
Open up the chat.
I'm happy to stay as well for a while.
Yeah, this whatever's best for you guys. I'm down.
You know, maybe I'm tempted to continue, Faisal, where your willingness to, be in relationship with anything. That resonates. The other part of it that resonates is I realized that having had more relationship feels like a wealth. To me, it feels like, the more that you've been able to be in relationship with the different experiences and artists, from a theater festival to an album to a walking through a museum, at the end of it, I feel more wealthy in a way that feels very sustaining, keeps me going back. And I have had those moments where I felt poorer, and it was usually a failure of my own, interface. Whenever I did feel like I needed to read every placard, every placard is like, oh, I didn't read them all. Maybe I left some, those are the experiences that I didn't benefit from. But when I moved through the museum and like swimming, waiting to see a snorkeling, seeing something that I swim up to and point, those have been the best experiences. So, and this has been one of those. I have to say, it's not always art. It's the transjective of us being together and exploring this. I feel a sense of wealth also. So thank y'all.
Oh, this is so good. I don't even need to talk. Like I just get, like no lie, I'll edit this out. But I just grabbed my guitar and learned your song, Owen. Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I love it. It's just beautiful. Yeah, we need to put the UTOK band together.
We do. And now it's Zoom,
oh, I know. We could sync it up.
I see Faisal's got a keyboard behind him. And
yeah, I've got a music room upstairs. We've got a bass, we got electric drums, we got djembes, saxophone, and I don't know if y'all have a Yamaha. I have a Yamaha P500 is what I have. I see some keyboards there. They look like Yamahas.
This is it. This is a Yamaha for sure.
Yeah, they work, man. They are weighted keys.
It feels real and it can sound really like
oh man, yeah,
60, nice. Like 200 different instruments.
Oh yeah.
Right next to me, I got a custom Martin 00028 I've had since I was 21. First thing that I ever bought with like my paycheck, cost me about $6,000 from the custom shop.
So
hey, the Singapore government paid for it. I paid for it with my army money.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. I took my tuition when I was in college. My parents gave me the amount of money for the whole semester at the beginning, and I took it down to the music store and bought a guitar when I was 17. It's like I'll figure out what happens next, and somehow I figured it out. There were some hot checks toward the end of May, but they didn't bounce too hard.
This like rebellious streak of like musicians that just go, all right.
It's an investment. I'm buying a work tool.
Ma. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on, Ma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like that, like a question comes to mind. It's like, what is it that motivated you to buy the guitar? Like there's like that, whatever it is that drew you to the music store, despite all, like, let's say modern rationality, like the constrained sense of rationality of like, it's not a good behavioral investment. It's not a good investment period of your money or anything, right? But there's a way in which something drew you there that was beyond anything that was directly intelligible and like it made sense, right? There's something transcendent that called to you, and here you are. Like that one decision has probably had a big impact, or like, I don't know, it's hard to say that, but yeah, like you're here in
changed
large
my
degree
life.
to that, right?
Well, what did motivate you to spend that money, Owen?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Part of it was
Right.
the unspeakable part, but then some of it was the pragmatic behavioral investment business, which is where I saw another guy playing on Wednesday nights. I live in Austin, so on Wednesday nights, and there was 100 people there, and he was singing, cover songs, but people were loving it,
Yeah.
And I was like, I know some of those songs he's playing. I know some of those. And he got me up as a guest. Hey, I need a break. Here, you play a couple of songs. Got up there, played a couple of songs, and felt that sense of, wow, people are paying attention. Whoa, I got through it. I felt that surge of cortisol and adrenaline, and then it went away, and people always slapped me on the back. So I did see some resources that were available, attentional resources, and ability to influence my peers. I was like, I just need the right guitar. I need the guitar to get in that. The guitar I had didn't have a pickup in it. I needed one with a pickup. So that's funny. And then part of it was, that transcendental feeling. So not to put that all aside, but because that was responsible for the big jump, writing the big check. But I did see that there were some resources to be collected, and I started playing Tuesday nights. Guess how many people come on Tuesday nights?
I figured 7.
me and the bartender. Wednesday night, 100 people, right? Oh, I'll play Tuesday nights. What? There's 50? No, there's 2.
That's awesome.
But yeah,
it's cool too that you're being fair about, like, you're not romanticizing that and saying, oh, it's because I knew that I was called to, it's like, part of up the stack. Some of it was I like the rhythm of the music. Some of it was I like the attention of the people. Some of it was I had a transcendent calling. Like, it's not one or, it's just diverse concoction of complexity. I love that.
Ethan and Faisal, thank you, Andrew. I've been reading a lot of biography of artists, and there is a lot of people report this moment when they're 12, 13, 14, 15, when they observe someone getting a lot of attentional resources, in which they it becomes a kind of an imprinting moment for them, and they kind of go, wait, I want to learn more about that. Have you guys experienced anything like that? No, interesting. Elvis, did, and Frank Sinatra did, and or at least their biographers did, because they wrote about.
I fell into it as a. No, go ahead, man. No. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I don't have much to say. I was just gonna say I had a very, my diving into art was from a place of necessity, like existential necessity.
Cool.
Yeah, there's a lot I could say there, but I'll just leave it at that. It was something that there was no choice, that I had to do. It saved me, and the reason why I'm here is because for some weird reason, I started writing and rhyming. Well, inspired by hip hop. I grew up in hip hop, and I had a lot of influences that taught me more than any other aspect of my life, more than school, more than my parents. I learned more in hip hop, listening to hip hop. And from that, that was an influence, but it wasn't clear, because that wasn't the thing that drove. Why did I keep writing for freaking 12 years, even though it made no sense at any point in my life? Because I had to. That's all I can say. Existential necessity. Can't hear you, Ethan. Fuck. Now we can.
Now you can? Okay.
Yeah.
No, existential necessity, running away from an abusive home is like, okay, well, guess what? I can feel much better if I'm anybody else but me. Woohoo! And then that's how it sort of grew, and then it became, that's as early as when I was 7. So it's like, I'm very well past that moment, and I think it's reoriented somewhat, hopefully in a good way. And I see traces of it, like in my theater. It's always sort of like, okay, I'm never a performer anymore. I tend to make shows, but like I make shows that try and get people to dialogue about something, and it's facilitated in that way, um, such that, perhaps there's almost a reclamation where in my work, like the actors are really themselves at the core, and they make that known, and they break the fourth wall, and they speak from where they are, not as character. They speak as they are. And so it has that meta modern sort of dimension to it. But it's also present in, like, the reason why I bought my guitar, for example, is not because like I want to play for anybody. I'm actually really shit. But it's more as like this, I want to buy something which I can pass on to my son, and it becomes a family heirloom. Even if nobody fucking plays it, it's like, it satisfies the Chinese part of me to go, this is very expensive, you must pass it on, so it's so and it's like I look at it, and then it's like, oh, I get to tell that story of like, when I first got this guitar, this is Italian Alpine spruce. It used to be white, now it's very yellow. It's like it shows the age in some ways, and I think more than anything, it's a symbol of something that could be. And who knows, maybe a couple of generations down the line, my great-great-grandson might come and go like, if I have this, I get to play all the songs that I didn't know I could play. And I can get on that train and get on that path to learn all the songs I couldn't play. Who's this Bob Dylan guy? Oh, let's do that. Yeah, so something like a call to the unknown, I suppose.
And thanks for sharing that, guys. I guess to clarify, I will say that buying that guitar was one thing. Starting to write songs was resonates with both of your experience a little more. But that particular guitar check was something else.
Yeah, I'll tell you mine real quick.
Please.
I started playing at church. So like my parents made me go to church. Like we went to an evangelical sort of, I don't even know if you guys know, like American Protestant church that's sort of trying to be contemporary and do some, they need a guitar player and find the youth group kind of thing. I was born in 1981, so I'm probably close to y'all's age. I don't know exactly, but yeah, then I got lucky, like super lucky. So I started playing, and then I had a friend that was like a big Nirvana guy. And so we learned all that. Then I bought a bass guitar. So I was able to kind of walk the line between, like, we did all the 90s American grunge stuff, especially like the Seattle stuff. We did all that. And so I got to play shows. Playing shows are interesting because there's a dynamic with the audience. It's just different, and like you have to coordinate with the band, so I'm the bass player and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, have that. But then there's an energy and you could feel it. Like sometimes we need to change our set because the energy is different, whatever. But then I met a friend. This is how I actually got into like spirituality of the insides. I met a friend who was into Christian contemplative Christianity. So sort of like Meister Eckhart and Saint Teresa and that kind of thing. And so I started to get into that and got into what we did. It was a really cool thing. Like they had like this, they used to do what they would call daily prayer at this church. And so it was every morning at 6. It's kind of like mass. But what we would do is I would just bring my guitar and we would just start playing. And then for like 30 minutes, it would just be sort of meditation, like you do your own thing. And they didn't know they were doing like these practices. For them, this was just like what they were, this is what they did. And then we came up sort of with the idea of, hey, why don't we like read scripture and have singers like start to sing and like spontaneously create prayer, but let's don't like pray like regular old, dear Lord, like let's say, a verse like there's faith, hope, and love, and that what remains is love, something like that. And so I'm not a Christian now, so don't worry, like I'm not proselytizing, but so we would do that, and then somebody would just be like, I want to be love. And then like one of the singers would go, love is what I want to be. And then like there would be, and then it'd be like love, and so like, and then and then we started getting more musicians to come. So like people were just like, hey, I'll bring, a djembe or whatever. And then you just sort of create that. And then you like start to sort of share your intentions. It's really neat, as you like flow through it. And then there'll be a time where you can feel the energy. It's like, it's time to stop. Like, it was just like so cool. And so when I went through that contemplative journey, that's what led me into sort of like, this is back in like the 2000s. I got into integral stuff and then met Greg, and then one thing led to another. But yeah, so I still have like that same guitar, and like it's sitting right over there, and it's got like all the, marks from playing. And I bet you I went 5 days a week from 6 to 7 a.m. for 2 years in a row. And we did that. I mean, so this is like a practice, and like these are loving people, like they're still doing it. I just kind of moved on, but it was such a cool thing. And there's like little pockets of that crap everywhere.
I love that. Yeah. So it was kind of like our improvising and kind of developing the sounds different. You plan some of it, but some of it just kind of emerged. Yeah, emerged.
Somebody will grab one like, I just made that up. Love is where we want to be. Sure, but then like one of the girls will start harmonizing. Love is where we want. And the whole room will start singing it for maybe 15 seconds. We'll repeat it 10 times. And then you kind of know like, okay, it's enough's enough. And then we stop. And then the music goes back down. Ding, 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 ding.
So the improvisation part of it
was so beautiful. Neat. And that's why I really got into Rumi and the Sufis, which is great that where I thought Bard was going earlier was Sufis, was not Zen. I thought he was going with Zoroastrianism and Sufis. But yeah, I just thought that was super cool that he did that. You're exploding over there.
What's that for?
You got super excited. The computer is telling you about your excitement.
That's funny.
So yeah, I feel like I'm talking too much. But yeah, so like the Sufis, like with Rumi, I think that's what they were doing. I think the whirling dervishes, I think they were like having these sessions where like you start to get in the spirit of it, and you really get into a flow state, a collective flow. I think it's similar to what Vervaeke's talking about with collective intelligence, but this is more like collective something else. I call it collective effervescence, but it's some kind of energetic something. And you could tell when it hits.
I've been geeking out on the history of rock and roll a little bit, just kind of reading more about it. And man, that experience you're talking about, a lot of the people that ended up being really influential in creating rock and roll had church experiences.
Yeah.
Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis, James Brown, Aretha Franklin, so that's a big source. That's a big source of wealth, a well for a lot of art.
I think Ethan's going, so we can call it.
Thanks for pulling together the conference, Andrew. It's going great.
Yeah, sorry if I talked too much there at the end.
No,
not at all.
No, not at all. Not at all, man. Seriously. Thank you so much.
Love y'all.
Fellas, thank you for the conversation. Looking for more tomorrow.